I'm Sarah from the Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Excited to speak to you.
Maybe you could just kick off with a brief introduction to this incredible documentary, Lewis Capaldi, How I'm Feeling Now. For people who don't know anything about it, I mean, I'm sure unless people have been living under the rock, they know who Lewis Capaldi is. But what can they expect from the documentary?
It's not what I think you're expecting from a Lewis Capaldi documentary. So coming into it, I think when it was first talked about at Pulse Films, I was slightly hesitant about taking on a subject that was so young and that it seemed like was kind of early in their career. So what's kind of the journey? What's the story? And I guess when I started kind of digging into it with Lewis, I realised there was so much going on with him, both incredible career stuff, but also in his personal life, that it felt like an opportunity to really do something big and important, and something that felt like it would resonate culturally. And I think that what we've been able to achieve, is something that's both it's hilarious at times, it's deeply painful and hard to watch at times. But what else do you want from films? That's what we're trying to deliver always, right?
Absolutely. And were you always a big fan of his? Had you, already been listening to his music? And at what point did it all sort of kick off? Because it has been a really meteoric rise for him. I mean, he's not been around for that many years. And then sometimes these documentaries do take years, to build the material, and you're following them for a long period of time. So where did it all kick off for you?
Well, luckily, Lewis has people, camera people following him pretty much since the beginning. So we had access to this huge wealth of archive, which was shot by a number of different people over the years. But no, it wasn't a particular fan necessarily before I knew of him. I thought he was absolutely hilarious. Of course, I'd seen all the Instagram and all that stuff. And I knew who the character was that he was presenting to us. And I'd heard a couple of the tracks. Obviously, I mean, you can't escape someone you love. It's absolutely everywhere. And I thought there was something curious about him, because the person he does put out into the world is this incredibly self-deprecating, incredibly interesting, incredibly funny character who's also very vulnerable and honest and all those things in his music. So there was to coin a very pop term, a dichotomy in the character, which felt like it was worthy of digging into. And I felt like, as soon as I met him, I immediately kind of felt that. And this was just before the second lockdown in COVID, I believe. So we met and kind of went straight up to Scotland and kind of embedded up in Scotland for a good few months in that initial bit of filming. But over the 2.5-3 years that we were with him, we were there most of the time, I would say. We were around with him a lot, which was incredible that he allowed us to do that, because normally when you're shooting, you have limited days, or the people don't want you around. But actually, Lewis would invite us up to every opportunity. So, it was when we looked at the amount of cards we shot at the end, it was well into the 400s, which is not something that our editor was particularly excited about. But hey, we made an amazing film afterwards.
Watching it, I think I laughed out loud. I was in tears, at more than one moment. It is such a roller coaster ride. I mean, often with documentaries like this, it's quite a simple subject in a way. You're following one individual, but there's just so many different emotions that you go through watching it. So I wonder, from a filmmaker's perspective, what that experience was like for you. And, some moments are difficult to watch. And of course, this is, just an hour and a half taken from however many hours you had of material. Was that ever really challenging for you? And how did you kind of cope with, I guess, trying to be a fly on the wall, but also, you are there, you are a human being, and you are witnessing kind of someone having these struggles. So, what was that experience like for you?
It was at time, it was incredibly hard. Lewis and I, and Alice, my Rhodes, a producer who worked incredibly closely on this, was with me every step of the way. We worked very hard to become very close with Lewis, which wasn't that hard, to be honest. But equally, just being around as much as possible and being with his family meant that it just opened all the doors, and it meant that they trusted us, so we could be there for everything. Lewis never told us to turn the camera off at any moment. And I have a huge amount of respect for him doing that, because I think he went from that very first meeting when I sat with him, when we didn't really know what we were making. He said, I want it all filmed. It doesn't matter what it is. I want it all filmed. This has to be honest. It has to be truthful. Because I think that you watch there are an incredible amount of music documentaries in the world. And a lot of them are about a person, not with that person. And I think going into this, it was about, how do we make this with Lewis? And how do we be with him along this journey and try and support him when he needed us? To be honest, he as you can see from the film. It's a very stiff Scottish upper lip type attitude to the way he goes about his life. But at the same time, what it did do was, I think it showed a bit of a mirror to what was really going on and what was going on with his family as well, and how it actually what was going on with him really resonated through everything he was doing. Because I don't think, unless it's shown to you, you can really, when you're in it, how could you possibly know? So I think that was a big thing, and I know that his mum and dad have been talking a lot more to him about what's going on, and it's opened up a dialogue that's of much more understanding, which I'm incredibly proud of, that we've been able to do that.
Mm. And it's so interesting that you say that, because I was thinking there must be a fine line between almost having a camera there, perhaps sometimes might have added to the feeling of kind of being on a show and being under pressure. But actually, as we watch the documentary, it also almost maybe feels like, not that you were their therapist, but the filming of the documentary allowed some kind of space for him to realize what was happening, and that, you know, he did need to press pause. And some of those conversations with his parents, you know, talking about his auntie, I believe, and in the relevance of the song, you know, that's kind of written about that. Perhaps these are topics they hadn't had that space to think about and speak about before. So do you think it kind of played a role in a positive way as well in him going on this journey?
I think it totally did. I mean, Lewis says it in the film when he's talking about the suicide of his aunt. He literally says, "I've never talked to my mum about this." And if you think about what that means, is there's a globally successful song about his aunt's suicide, and you've never had that conversation with your mother. And your mother's been to how many gigs listening to you play that, and I've seen her get emotional, and that's just the way they are. But what was interesting for me is I come from an incredibly open, very emotional family. So to watch quite a closed family was an interesting experience for me, because I'd never witnessed parenting in that way, and it was an interesting thing. And I felt, as I say, I felt really amazing that we were able to open that dialogue and give them a bit of a forum to start talking. I'm certainly not a psychologist or anything like that, but if someone can get something out of this, it feels like it's a worthy cause.
And you know, on that note, was there a particular moment that you did find, you know, the most difficult to film, or you thought, oh gosh, are we actually going to have to stop making the documentary? And then on the flip side of that, you know, a real proud moment for you in the making of it or watching it back. You know, maybe some of those moments where he's up on stage with all his adoring fans, or the breakthrough when he finally sort of lands on the songs that feel right for his second album.
Well, it was quite hard, because for two and a bit years of making this documentary, I never saw Lewis perform because of COVID. So you're talking about this person, and I've seen obviously YouTube rushes and all that kind of YouTube videos of all these performances, but I've never actually seen him go up and do it. And I remember standing at the O2. It was one of the last things we filmed in the whole documentary, and just being like, "Oh, that's why you do this. That's why you're meant to be up there." And it's the same as the last line he says in the film. It's like, standing in front of 50,000 people, it's where I'm meant to be. And I think that there is a moment where you're just like, this is exactly where you're meant to be. Whether that's going to, you know, that clearly has its ramifications on him and what's happening to him. But if you get so much from it and you're so entertaining, and people love his words, people love him. And you see that when you're in those moments, you're standing with, as I say, 50,000 people staring back at him, and there's adoration, there's tears, there's connection, there's all the things that are amazing about concerts and about musicians and everything we love about that. And if there are so few people who do that, and so few people actually connect, so when you see it happen, it's a beautiful moment. And you just know when you're doing that kind of everything you've been through on the film, which is a very insular film for a long time. It doesn't grow, it doesn't become something else for a long time. It feels like we're serving the right cause, because when you do get to that moment where Lewis steps on the stage at the end of the film, not to ruin the ending or anything, but when you do get there, it's a beautiful moment, and I feel like you're happy for him. I mean, you wonder what's going to happen next, but you're very happy for him. Mm-hmm. And in terms of hard things to film, being in LA with him was quite hard. That section of the film when he was really struggling, being away from home, the writing sessions weren't going quite as well as he'd hoped. And there was a few moments when Alice and I did question whether we gave him some space, to be honest. We gave him some space because it felt like what we were doing was not helping. And we're not here to hurt people, or, you know, we were getting the story we needed to get all the time. So it was supporting Lewis in the moments where he didn't need us, I think, was also important. There's
a really key line for me where he says, isn't this a normal reaction to what's going on? That's not a word for word quote, but something to that effect. And I thought that was really key, because in a way, is it true? Is a regular person supposed to be, put under that amount of pressure, put under a spotlight to that extent? The people that can really handle fame and really handle that lifestyle are actually few and far between. And, not to sort of put too fine a point on it, we've seen through history there's been lots of people in the public eye that haven't made it and haven't survived that. So it does call into question this idea of putting people up on these pedestals and that level of expectation. Do you think that was an interesting comment? And is that kind of an interesting theme to draw out?
It's a very interesting thing to draw out. I think we've seen through history, we don't need to name the films that we're thinking about, but we know exactly what films we're thinking about, that these things do play out badly. And you do see record labels not being supportive and not doing making the right moves. And often it's about protecting a product. And that's quite a scary thing when it comes to something like a human being. And I think this film shines a bit of a light on that, to be honest. And I do think there are definitely moments in this that are quite hard to watch from that side of things. But the music industry hasn't changed. That's I'm making a series at the moment with Robbie Williams, and nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. It's all the same. And he says the same thing. It's like, it's the same reaction to being up on stage. It's like, it's nothing normal about this. It's nothing normal about 90,000 people staring at you. And he, it's who would want to be around the guy who enjoys that? Because I wouldn't.
And it's also that, something interesting. I mean, I'm not a songwriter. I don't have any kind of spectacular talent, but even my work sometimes involves something creative. And there's also this point that comes out, which is, he's used to writing songs on his own in a very kind of personal way, without thinking about kind of an audience necessarily, but just kind of thinking of the content of that song. And then suddenly, when you're asked to kind of produce something kind of on demand, does that kind of take away from the creative process? Maybe that is not how we create the best work. And there's some kind of contradiction there, or an impossible task that's been set for him. Because how can you do something so personal if it doesn't come from an authentic place? So there's something
I would say, I think yes and no, because I think pressure is incredibly important, and when pressure is not applied, we don't necessarily achieve. So I think it kind of goes both ways. But I think that pressure, I think the pressure needs to be managed. I think that would be my kind of take on this. It just needs to be managed. And I think the best thing, that you can't be thinking about where this is going. Like when we're making films, we're not thinking about where this is going. You're not really thinking about the audience most of the time. You're thinking about what's affecting me right now, what's emotional to me, what's making me laugh. And then we'll think about the audience later. Like, we've got to get through it myself. And I think there were times when Lewis was thinking too far ahead. And I think if he was slightly more present, some of those writing sessions would have been more successful for him. But that's not really for me to comment, considering he came out with an incredible list of songs, and that album's going to do incredibly well, and he's achieved so much and all of the stuff. But I hear you. But I think pressure is very important in the creative process. Otherwise, we end up tinkering for the rest of our lives, and nothing gets done.
I think the other thing that's very key in this documentary, for Lewis particularly, is his generation as well. Because yes, we've seen perhaps some similar arcs, for artists, music artists, other kind of creators in the past. But you realize what's different for his generation is, even before he was famous, he was putting out stuff on Instagram. Like, his whole life has been kind of under some kind of public eye from the beginning. Because obviously you've done documentaries like with Bros, and you're working with Robbie Williams. What do you think is different about this generation, and how that role of social media kind of plays out?
That's a good question. I guess it's the accessibility that you have now to these people. They're at the end of your phone 24 hours a day. They're always there, and I think you feel like you know them a lot more as a result. And there's an authenticity that is put out into the world through social media that's not authentic. And someone like Lewis is the character you're seeing. Like, he's doing fart and dick jokes at the same time as doing things that are about crying and being upset and being emotional and mental health. That's all of us. We all want to make stupid jokes, and we all want to talk about how we're actually feeling. And I think there are enough examples of people who are in the public light who are massive stars who give nothing of themselves. And I think there's something really fresh and inspiring about someone who's vulnerable in the open. And that's when social media works, because it allows a conversation. When it's fake, it's the opposite. And too often it's fake.
And in terms of what you hope people take away, I mean, it does feel like, it is really eye-opening. And, you sort of have so much respect for Lewis allowing himself to be so vulnerable in front of an audience. But you can sense that he felt it was important to share that story. And I guess we don't all have to be pop stars to have suffered that feeling of anxiety. And how is that kind of accentuated by our current climate and social media, et cetera, particularly for men, perhaps, and maybe have, the courage to reach out for help or acknowledge it's a problem, So what do you think the importance is of the documentary and shining a light on this?
I think that's exactly it. It's opening up a dialogue. This is mental health writ large. You're watching 93 minutes of it. And I think if you can find any part of yourself in what Lewis's journey, even if it's on a smaller scale, it's not in front of as many people, but we're all affected day to day with self-doubt, self-loathing, all of the things that Lewis goes through on a day-to-day basis. His is just in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Ours, that doesn't diminish our journey at all. But if you're seeing someone who, it's exactly as he says in that new song. The whole song is about how I'm feeling now. You'd think that I would be okay. You think that this is all working and it's all happiness. But the reality is it's not how this works. Money doesn't bring that. Adulation doesn't bring that. It's what's going on inside that matters. And knowing that people who supposedly are supposed to have it all together don't, I think actually opens up quite a big dialogue around how we're feeling and how we are feeling now.
And I just wanted to make mention as well, I mean, he's just hilarious. I was watching his This Morning interview and he just cracked. Yeah. And also this big billboard, which obviously that was a planned joke, right? Or am I being thick? Yes, it was. Yeah. Distrust.
Yeah, yeah, of course. But it's great. I mean, that's the thing. Lewis has an incredible sense of humor, and the promotion he has done already and continues to do around the show it's incredible. And it's exactly that. It's Lewis. And then I think that's the point. People are going to come to this finding the guy they think they know and understand him even better after this.
And I know you had the premiere up in Glasgow. How did it feel playing this out in front of an audience? And what's been the reaction so far?
I wasn't there.
Oh, and sorry. Well,
so good.
I bet they were the same as me, laughing, crying.
I'm sure they were. No, I heard it went down incredibly well, but sadly, I was on a shoot, so I couldn't.
And can you quickly tell us what you're going to be working on next? Oh, you said, so what can we expect from Robbie Williams? So
yeah, it's a 4-part Robbie Williams Netflix series, which will be on Netflix in November, and it's the journey of Robbie's life. With I don't want to go too again. It's not what you're expecting from a Robbie Williams documentary, and I think that's the most important thing to take from this.
Have you got anything else in the works, or anything that you've sort of got on your bucket list of other people you'd like to sort of work with or make documentaries about?
Not at the moment. Going to take a bit of a break after this one, I think.
Well, it's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me. I can't wait for it.